I feel like a winner just being on the panel.
Oh.
Hey, you can come again.
Nice work.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're online now, so and live. So thank you very much. Welcome everybody. Welcome to the London International Animation Festival, and this is an industry panel. We've got some amazing guests. This panel's on animating the metaverse. What the metaverse might offer to animators, particularly. This year was the year of speculation about the metaverse, as I'm sure you've recognized. There are signs that technology might be there to start creating this network of 3D virtual worlds focused on social connection and commerce. Should animators keep an eye on developments in this area? What kinds of opportunities may emerge in games or wider community platforms? Will there be a need for animated content beyond games? And if so, what might that be? And how might today's animators prepare for new work the metaverse might require? If anybody knows, it's our panel here today. We've got a wide variety of wisdom here. We've got, I'll run through the panel, and then we'll kick off with some questions. And then, dear audience, if you want to ask any questions, please put them in the chat. They'll be scooped up by our friendly backstage gnome who will present them to us. So that's how we can start a great discussion going. But my panel today, we've got Jo Redfern. She's a leader in children's media with almost 2 decades experience in content strategy. She's worked on brands such as Peppa Pig and at a variety of broadcasters and studios such as Disney and the BBC. Her passion is for developing content at the intersection of entertainment, education, and technology, primarily across digital platforms such as YouTube, Roblox, TikTok, and Fortnite, thus engaging young people where they spend most of their time. Of late, she's been creating strategies for how young people will consume media in the metaverse and use it to develop opportunities. Kevin Sharpley is the founder of Kijik Multimedia, a full-service multimedia company with specialities in integration, branded and convergent media, and development of in-house projects. His range of work includes film, TV, web, documentary, computer graphics, gaming, augmented and virtual reality, animation, metaverse, NFT, new media, and more. He is also the founder of the company Xavatar, which we'll hear about soon, which produces animated, universally native, autonomous avatars for video, telecom, and a metaverse and animated show, The Sync Report, for them to inhabit. He's joined by Gianfranco Bianchi. He's a founder and the CCO of Xavatar Limited. He is the creator of the original Xavatar avatars, the artistic look and feel of the company, and the Sync Report. He's a multi-dimensional visual artist and started his career creating architectural visualizations that became animations and then visual effects for films, music videos, and short films. His latest project has been creating an interactive experience mobile app for the opera in Lausanne, as well as creating an animated short film that is making the festival rounds. We hope to be joined later on by Kadine James, who's having a problem with their connection, and if so, we'll bring her on. So don't be surprised if another face pops up shortly. But I'm going to start off by asking each one of our learned colleagues to present for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have lots of time for questions. So, Jo, over to you.
Thank you. Well, it's great to be here, actually. I'm pleased to be back. This is my second time joining you at the London International Animation Festival. So pleased to be sharing or talking about one of my favourite subjects. If anyone follows me on LinkedIn, you'll know I talk about the metaverse a lot of late. But right, well, let's get straight into it, I guess. My lens will always be looking at the metaverse from the point of view of young audiences. Having spent as many years as I have in children's media and kids media, it's something that is looming large on our radar. The nice thing about working in kids media is that you're already kind of in the future business, because they're way ahead of us old people, aren't they? Let's face it. So what's interesting is looking at how this emerging idea of the metaverse, and I always use this term emerging because we're not there yet. The definitions are, there are many definitions of the metaverse. It's not necessarily a place, it's not fully formed. So the best way to describe it is this kind of emerging concept. However, the metaverse does undoubtedly offers lots of opportunities for content creators, animators, filmmakers, live action creators, games makers alike. So, yes, I'm Jo Redfern, Global Brand Director. I've put Ann Metaverse Nerd on there because I am. If I talk to my kids about the metaverse, they roll their eyes and call me a boomer. But you know what? It's something that I think is fascinating to more than just me. Right. We're in an age of tech acceleration. Well, what does that actually mean? Well, so according to Wunderman Thompson, the agency, there's 3/4 of global consumers say that their everyday lives depend on technology. You know, I've got this next to me here. We're not very far from technology at any point in our day, are we? However, we look at the younger demographics like Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and that's even higher. Their dependence on technology increases. It's intertwined in their lives. It's instinctive. But what is the metaverse? Well, as I've said, the metaverse to kids, almost like calling kids digital natives, means nothing, actually. It's as instinctive as everyday life because their lives are already intertwined with the digital world. So this concept of the metaverse, again, that's what prompts eye rolls from my kids. But what is it? Well, do you know what? Let's not worry too much about defining it. Let's let kids tell us what the metaverse should be or is currently to them as it's emerging. And we can do that by looking at their behaviors. So we know that young people are replicating their passions, their hobbies, their interests. They're doing it in the digital realms. I often explain it as the digital realm already exists to a point. In terms of the metaverse and the true metaverse with interoperability and seamless moving between these areas, that's the tricky bit that we haven't quite got right. But there are digital worlds and realms that already exist. They exist in parallel to real life. Real life isn't going anywhere. The difference being that kids and that we will oscillate in and out of this digital realm, this notion of the metaverse through our daily lives. At some points, we're very immersed. We could be immersed in terms of VR that is all encompassing. Actually, at other points, we're kind of half immersed. Kids use AR and filters a lot. Snapchat is probably the one that you're most familiar with, but increasingly, AR is overlaying digital information or characters or storytelling over the real world. That's a different level of immersion. And at other times, kids will be largely based in the real life. Like I said, that's not going anywhere. They still want to hang out with their friends. But ultimately, this oscillation will happen in and out of the metaverse at various points in any given time of day. So what are they doing there? Well, they're spending money. Actually, they're hanging out there. We know that a lot of the metaverse is about hanging out with your friends. It's not always to dip into this digital realm to do something specifically. Actually, going and hanging out there is cool too. You will know on Roblox, if anyone has any young people in their lives that go onto Roblox, that's inherently social. You can spawn your friends right next to you in an experience. I've heard of kids holding birthday parties in Roblox. It's a very social platform. We know what's also important to kids who are on Roblox a lot is this buying digital fashion for their avatar, this emergence of the importance of their digital identity versus their real life identity. And there's a lot of reports that I've read that show that they've reached parity. Kids place as much importance on their digital identity as they do their in real life one. And around 20 to 25% of Kids who are on Roblox daily will change their avatar. They will change the way it's dressed. They'll buy some new clothing for it. So again, this element of digital identity, not just how they look, but also finding their tribe, finding people to connect with online, expressing themselves online is really important to young people. What else are they also doing in this idea of this emerging metaverse? Well, they're making connections, again, finding their tribe. We know, you will remember, in your teenage years, you were experimenting with different looks, different ways of behaving, hanging out with different groups of people. That's not changed, but now they're doing it online. They're making virtual connections globally. Yes, they're playing games. Of course they are. Huge number of experiences on Roblox, 50 odd million of them, and Fortnite Creative 2 is just dropping. Lots of opportunity for gameplay for kids, but also they're not just playing. Like I said, they're hanging out. They're watching, they're collaborating, they're doing things, they're creating, they are sharing. Again, kids are inherent sharers and they're buying. So going back to something that you said, Saint, community and commerce, two things that go hand in hand in this idea of the metaverse. And actually, it's a very powerful way for creators and brand owners like me to think about how we tell stories across these platforms. So given the context that this is what kids are doing in this emerging space, the metaverse, what's important to them? Well, we've seen a little bit about what they're doing, so clearly that's important to them. But in terms of storytelling, creating IP, creating characters, worlds, narratives, what does this mean to young people in these spaces that they're hanging out on? Basically, low friction is what they want. Again, if you look into the metaverse, the idea of this seamless metaverse where you can fluidly take your identity, your avatar across worlds, and I'm no doubt Kevin and Gianfranco will speak to this. The idea is that actually you don't have to sign out and sign in of worlds. You don't have to change your avatar. There will be this fluid, it's interoperability, where your online persona will be able to move with low friction across this space. That means that kids also want low friction content delivery. If you have a brand, an IP, some characters, a world, a story to tell, actually the opportunity as this space opens up is to create seamless content, cohesive, that works across all of these platforms and crucially works in harmony. Now, this really means that storytellers have to rethink how they build those narratives and those stories, those characters and those worlds, because no matter what the point of entry, whether it's hanging out with your friends in real life but watching TikTok, or whether it's being fully immersed in virtual worlds, maybe through VR, or maybe it's hanging out on these proto-metaverse platforms like Roblox, your characters and your stories have to make sense no matter what that point of entry. So it kind of mixes up and throws it all into a big melee, this idea of creating worlds and characters and narratives. And that's a real opportunity for animators and storytellers and creators alike. Audio platforms I've put in there too. Let's not forget, kids like to listen. Very often will listen whilst they're also playing. They're keen dual screeners and they multitask as well. And the metaverse opens up a lot of opportunity for that. And of course, real life's not really going anywhere. We're not all going to exist online and online solely, certainly not in the near future. So thinking about that low friction content delivery, how can you make your characters and your creations work across all of these platforms and work in harmony? It's tricky. It requires a lot of thinking, a lot of content planning, a lot of platform strategy, but actually it's really exciting. So I've jumped ahead. What does it mean for content? As I've said, it means that we need to really rethink content strategy as creators of animated IP, as storytellers. Thinking about the narrative as a flywheel I've mentioned there. And by that, I mean thinking about your brand, your characters, your world at the center. Because if you can create something at the center, then the idea is that you can service narrative across these platforms in different ways. Kids like to engage with characters and worlds on TikTok, but you need to think about how you can tell that story and get the characters across in very short form vertical video, 60 seconds tops. Actually, the average length of video consumption on TikTok is sub 30 seconds. How do you manage to articulate your characters and your worlds and your narratives across that platform? But then over here, you've got YouTube that stands a longer viewing experience. Then you've got platforms like Roblox, where you can have much more immersive and engaging experiences with your audience. You can let them manipulate characters. You can let them change characters, make their own stories with characters. There is even a function on Roblox to broadcast content from within a game. So again, it kind of tears up the rule book of the old way of telling stories, which was a very linear way of doing it. Actually, now this idea of narrative in your world and your creations at the center, and then thinking about how you can articulate them across all of these storytelling points and across the platforms is the real opportunity. That does mean reducing that way of creating in the verticals that we perhaps all did many years ago in our careers. So think concurrent, think cross-platform. And again, these social platforms, it was always the case that social platforms were just your marketing. You went onto Instagram or Snap or TikTok, they were your marketing channels. Actually, they're not your marketing channels anymore. They are an opportunity to tell your story there too. So really, I would say, I would encourage creators to think about every platform as an opportunity to engage the audience and tell stories in a slightly different way. But actually, it's an opportunity to make your IP and your creation really sing across the whole gamut of that content and platform flywheel. So that's really what I wanted to talk about today. Hopefully it gives a little bit of context in terms of how I think the metaverse opens up opportunities for creators, and I'm sure will prompt a lot of questions. So I'll be quiet and let Kevin and Gianfranco speak now, and then I'll be back later.
Well, actually, because I know Kadine hasn't managed to make it so far. She's battling with bandwidth. But if I could just ask a couple of questions, Joe, just to sort of maybe spawn further questions later on. And first of all, and it was very heartening that you sort of said, don't think just about marketing as marketing, but think about the stories and multiple points of entry for people into those stories. And I just wondered if you've come across any resistance to the idea of young people and the metaverse from parents who are not sort of digital natives themselves and may be a bit worried about their children. Have you come across that kind of pushback from parents?
Of course, yes. Safeguarding absolutely has to be paramount. It's something that we've seen over the years has been an issue across YouTube with copy compliance, across Instagram with kids on Instagram finding content that isn't suitable. And even those established platforms, we've still not managed to crack that safeguarding nut yet. So what that does mean is that we have an opportunity as the metaverse does emerge to try and fix some of those problems. And it's nice to see bodies beginning to form and congregate around these issues. You've got metaverse standards forums popping up. And actually, that's really heartening. I think it will be tricky to solve. Also, the responsibility does fall a lot with educational institutions, us as parents, actually. A lot of millennial parents did grow up as TikTok natives. So again, are slightly ahead of perhaps my generation of parents in terms of being aware of the dangers. So, talking to kids about this issue of jigsaw identification, for example, leaving little bits of yourself all around the internet and the digital realm can be quite risky because people can pull those together and get quite an accurate picture of kids. So making them aware of, actually, we know their identity is important to them, but actually there are risks when you put your identity out there. So being careful with how much personal information you do leave around the internet. So that said, yes, it's a tricky one. I don't have an answer. I don't think we have an answer across the board yet. I think it will emerge. I think from that, we need to make sure that we put those safeguards in place. But I think we also need to make sure that we just keep talking to kids about those dangers and also balance it. We know that It's helping increase their sense of community. I mentioned finding tribes. Actually, it's very good for self-esteem and self-esteem and self-expression in that way, but it doesn't come without a downside.
Thank you for that. I think hopefully that's triggered some sort of questions from people out there. If you're a parent, maybe, but do drop some questions in the chat for later. And I think we'll move on now to Kevin and Gianfranco. So take it away. Let's hear from yourselves.
Yeah, so that was great, Joe, and it's a great overview of what's to come. What I think a lot of people are wondering is what the metaverse is. And, you know, in a bigger sense, it's connected to the movement of the internet, which is moving into Web3. And, you know, I place it in a simple term. Web3 is the 3D-ification of the internet in a way. So as technology increases and the ability for that technology to give a broader outreach to people, you're going to eventually see the ability to, instead of going to a static website, you're going to have the ability to go into a website. So you'll have the ability to go into a store. You'll have the ability to go into the Louvre and into these different locations. And so the metaverse really connects into this movement of the greater movement of Web3. And you have big companies that are behind that movement and people. That's everyone from Apple to Google to Facebook, who are really priming to move into this next phase of Web3. I really love what Joe had to say about cross-platform storytelling, which really is the movement and what's going to happen as, you know, this transformation moves forward. And that's telling stories across multiple media platforms. It's very important. And just for our audience, this is for animators. I'm going to speak just to animators. What you're going to find is that a lot of the skills that you've learned in animation, you're going to be able to transport those skills into this movement, into what is Web3 and this movement into metaverse, because everything from, you know, building models to understanding architecture to the list goes on and on of things that you do in animation, you utilize those same skills towards metaverse creation and creating projects in the metaverse. And I don't want to just stick to metaverse. We're here on behalf of my company, Xavatar, which, as Saint mentioned, we do animated avatars for video telecom. So you see my avatar right now, you know, it's moving, you're dancing, we're having fun. So you'll be able to use these avatars for Zoom and Facebook Messenger and Google Meets and these things, but you'll also be able to use the avatars to enter our metaverse and other metaverses. So that's one of the pillars. Another pillar is we have a proof of concept show called the Sync Report that we're right in the throes of a network deal on that show. And so you'll be able to attend that show as your avatar self. The hosts are avatars, which we call Xavatars. The guests are Xavatars. If you want to attend as an audience member, you attend as a Xavatar and you'll be able to see the animated set. So it'll be just like being on a real set, except, you know, you'll be animated and everyone will be animated. So it's really, really cool. The concept of the show is we interview luminaries from around the film, media, and entertainment industry. That's sort of the middle part of the show. The second part of the third part of the show is we invite musicians to enter their songs for brief sync briefs for opportunities to get those songs placed on film, media, and entertainment projects. So you imagine, you know, big feature films, big television shows, but also independent fare. And then the first part of the show is the adventures of the cast and the crew throughout our metaverse that we call the Xavatarverse. The show takes place on a space station. It's really cool. So you'll be able to explore the space station. You'll be able to have games and play and these kinds of things. And you'll be able to go to the Earth and do pretty much the same things that you have the ability to do in what we're calling, you know, the first metaverses. So that's Sandbox, Decentraland, you mentioned Roblox. So you'll be able to, you know, purchase real estate, build things, and, you know, play games, and the list goes on and on. But the promise of this brave new world is that you'll be able to have a lot of content experiences. And so when you think in the broader sense, you have companies like Disney that named their head of metaverse, I believe in April and May. in May of this year. You have CAA, which is one of the biggest agencies in the world. they named their head of metaverse, Joanna Popper, who I know, I think 3 months ago. And so you have all of these companies now naming their heads of metaverse, and these are big companies. You have huge companies like NVIDIA that have metaverse strategies. Verizon, they have a metaverse department. So, it's not, is this thing going to happen? It's more when it's going to connect. So in that, oh no. And, I was talking about my internet and that I don't have problems with the internet. It looks like I'm freezing up just a little bit. I'm going to show a bit of our proof of concept show called the Sync Report, just so you all can kind of see how a lot of this converges. Oh, wait a minute. I have to make sure that I get the sound going. And here we go.
TSR-1, you are clear for landing. You're coming in hot again, Twiggy. Pull up, Twiggy. I know some people say we've never been up to the moon.
Welcome to the Sync Report, where we talk with some of the top people in the film, music and entertainment industries. Let's start it off with one of our favorite collaborators, one of the funniest in the infinite verse.
The multi-talented singer, writer, actor, and my friend, Reeve Carney.
You can see him in theaters as Tom Ford in The House of Gucci, from the Showtime series Penny Dreadful as Dorian Gray. He was Peter Parker on Broadway in Spider-Man After Dark. And he opened with his band for U2 and is slated to play Jeff Buckley in an upcoming biopic about his life.
On the acting stuff, what was it like just recently working with Ridley Scott?
I feel like he really finds a way of bypassing the artist's brain, which I think is so helpful.
In the second half, we have music sync opportunities where musicians vie to have their songs placed in film and TV projects from independent filmmakers and content creators.
Does it really make too much? Hold on, you ain't seen nothing yet. Hold on, it's just as you suspected. Hold on, just take a look around and you will see this world is stranger than you might believe.
So you'll see, this is really about the convergence of media. You saw Reeve Carney, who is in The House of Gucci, plays Tom Ford. He also is in Penny Dreadful, which is a Showtime series. And, he's done a lot of things in the, I guess you could say, more linear television realm. You'll be able to watch this show on TV, on the network that we're in the last throes of talking to. So this kind of, cross-platforming where you'll be able to attend the show as your avatar selves, and then people at home will be able to watch the show as a regular show is the promise of what's about to happen. In addition, you have other layers. So we did an NFT drop a few months ago, and that features Colin O'Donoghue, who's the host of our show. A lot of people know him from the show over here in the States called Once Upon a Time. He plays Captain Hook on that show. And he's also Jerry in the Apple film Luck. So we did a NFT drop. It did pretty well. So part of that NFT drop and part of the connection of all of that was to do a live event. And so we had a live event at the Button Factory in Ireland. The company's based in Ireland, with Paddy Casey, who the song that you heard, that's Paddy Casey singing in that song, one of Ireland's biggest singers. We also had Stephanie Rainey. And so people were able to, because of the NFT drop, attend the show. So on the second tier, they received tickets to attend the show. On the third tier, we flew people in, we put them up in hotels. They were able to go to an event, VIP, before the event, dinner, and then an after event to meet Colin O'Donoghue. And so it's this connection of the real world, the virtual world, and then I didn't mention augmented reality experiences and VR experiences, so XR experiences. So it's this promise of having this ability to connect in many different ways instead of only connecting, watching your television set, or only connecting in a live event, or only connecting now in augmented reality. And you'll see more happening in that augmented space. Facebook is now releasing a headset that's both augmented reality and virtual reality at the same time. Apple is pegged to do the same thing by the end of next year, beginning of the following year. And so you're going to see more access and the ability to access. I'm going to tell you very briefly, because I don't want to take up all the time, about what Xavatar is doing. And I'm going to show you better than tell you. So I just mentioned the sync report. And then this is a little bit more about what we're doing in the sync report. And you'll see here season 1. So we've already interviewed a lot of these folks. So Reeve Carney, all we need to do is to take Reeve Carney's voice and pipe it into our avatars. And then the avatars then take that voice and then animate. So ultimately with our avatars, what you're going to be able to do, since they're AI driven, is you'll be able to speak through your avatar, and after a couple of weeks, it will learn your gestures. You'll be able to turn off your camera, and then it kind of moves by itself. You'll see another person, Charlotte Church, who's pretty well known over there across the pond. I'm here in Miami. We interviewed her for our podcast. And so you'll be able to see the episode with Charlotte Church because we already have her voice. We have Antonio Campos here, who is now going to direct Arkham Asylum, which is one of the next iterations of the DC series. And then with our podcast, we've interviewed a lot of luminaries where we'll be able to take those luminaries' voices and utilize them for our avatars and for production. You'll see Steve Vai, for example, there, who's one of the greatest guitar players in the world. What you'll be able to do with the Steve Vai episode is, as the luminaries talk about what they're doing and where they've been and how their careers have evolved, you'll see a place that has helped to shape them. At the end of each episode, you'll be able to buy 2 NFTs. One of the NFTs will allow you to be able to come back to one of the episodes and ask a question. Another NFT will be based on the celebrity that is of that show. So Steve Vai, for example, you'll be able to buy a Steve Vai NFT. And then after the show, you'll be able to go to the Steve Vai studio, plug that guitar in, you'll get the Steve Vai sound, and you'll be able to invite your friends over. So, you know, if it's a DJ or a drummer or whatever, and they'll be able to play, you'll be able to have that as a download and have that as music that then you can put in your library. As I said, it's the next phase of connectivity, and that's across platforms. You know, so it's not just in the virtual space. People will be able to participate on their computers, on their laptops, on their cell phones. And as I mentioned, you'll be able to watch this show on linear TV. And it's all about the art environments and about connection. So that audience participation comes in many different ways, and we'll have many different ways for people to connect. So we talked about social media. We're going to be asking for concepts and guests to interview and these different things over our socials. So it's total interactivity. You'll see Policing the Metaverse there. And this is something that was mentioned, and that was a great, great question there, Saint, which is, you know, what about the protections? And so you want to make sure that you have the protections in place, and we put that front and center. And so there's different ways that we're exploring to ensure that those protections are in place. We mentioned the network deal, and then these are some of our other partners. And then these are the hosts, Colin O'Donoghue, as I mentioned, Rose Ganguza, who's the godmother of indie cinema, Jason P. Rothberg, who is our partner and a music expert. And then that's our team. You'll see Dean Lyon there, who is a visual effects legend, everything from Armageddon to Independence Day to Lord of the Rings. Wilfredo 7, a big DJ. He's from the group EMF, big group from over there in the UK and also the States. And our core values, mental health, of course. Part of our NFT drop, we gave 10% to this organization called So Sad Ireland, which they're about mental health awareness and suicide prevention. And of course, inclusion, equality. And, you know, like I said, we put these things front and center in everything that we do. I mentioned the avatars, the sync report, and then Xavatar, which is our production arm, which produces the sync report, but we have other offerings that we're going to launch out of our metaverse. This is a project called the Beach Chronicles, which is a multi-platform project that we've already developed. So we've already had an animated series or an animated film that has Daryl Hannah, Michael Chiklis, Tommy Flanagan, some pretty big deal people. Rami Jaffe of the Foo Fighters, you'll see him there. We have a comic book. The comic book is based off of a podcast series that we have, so you can listen as you read. And then we also have AR, so you can utilize the app, point it at the comic book, and you'll be able to see different things happening. This kind of cross-platforming is very, very important in this brave new world. And also, you'll be able to experience a Beach Chronicles version of our metaverse, which is called the Xavatar. So you'll be able to attend the metaverse and have different immersive experiences, both immersive films and immersive games. I mentioned the Xavatarverse, and that's the end of this one. So, this really is the promise. It's about immersive media. It's about connectivity. It's about giving the ability to, tell stories across these multiple platforms, but also do outreach. I mean, just imagine, gamers are already a part of this. So they're able to play games. Maybe someone in Georgia, is playing games with someone in Georgia, Russia, or, someone in London is playing games with someone in Miami. So these things are already happening, and they're also happening in a lot of these other platforms, Roblox, as you mentioned before, Decentraland, but having the ability to connect in many different ways. So I mentioned the NFT drop. We had people fly in from all over the world, people that had not met in person, and they were able to meet in person there at the event and connect. It was really a magical time. And we're still connected in many different ways via the podcast. We have a Clubhouse connecting room, our socials. And when we have the next event, we'll be able to outreach both in the live and when we launch our Xavatarverse. So, it really is an exciting time. I'm going to throw it to Gianfranco to talk a little bit more about, and this is for the animators, a little bit more about why your skills are going to be absolutely necessary for this next evolution.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. That was great explanation. So on my side, so I started as a traditional animator, and the best decision that I made was to start learning how to code. I don't need to be able to make AAA games, but the basic knowledge of coding that I started developing as I was honing in my animation skills has been extremely helpful for this step. And it was something that I wasn't even thinking of, that we were going to go into metaverse and all these things. It was way before. I was trying to figure out how to give life to my animations in a different ways. I was trying to find shortcuts so I didn't have to draw frame by frame everything. Then I started playing with Unity, and I made some augmented reality experiences, and all those things kind of came together. And because everything came together at the right moment, then Kevin and I and Jason started Xavatar, and everything just fell into place. So if I can say anything to any of you guys, traditional animators, is learn how to code, because it's so important now. It's the most important thing is an animator, I think, that knows how to code instead of a coder that's trying to animate, because there's a different mindset, and you need the full-on coders to finish everything the way it should be. But animators should have some idea of how all of it works.
Yeah, and then just to kind of jump on what Gianfranco was saying, in what we're doing. So, for example, you saw the sync report. which people will be able to participate. So you saw the space station, people will be able to go on the space station. They'll be able to traverse the space station. There'll be experiences. We'll have a room where people will be able to watch movies. We'll have a room where people will be able to listen to music. And of course, they'll be able to go on the set. People will be able to go off into the galaxy and play games. You know, that space station is a model, you know, and the set is different models that are there on the set. And, you know, when you talk about what we're doing there on the Earth and with the Beach Chronicles and other projects that we'll be launching, you know, those are models. And so, you know, we're utilizing the foundation of what's already been laid out. And this is, you know, I'm saying for animators, but also game developers, you know, Gianfranco mentioned coding. There's opportunities for everyone. And I'm just going to mention 2 numbers, and then I'll be done for my little spiel. The metaverse, they're looking for the metaverse to be an over $800 billion industry by 2024. By 2030, over $5 trillion industry. And there's a reason for that. It's not just because, you know, we're willing for it to happen. It's not just because, you know, look, I'm at the core a storyteller, although, you know, I've been doing this stuff for a long time. The reason why I have the ability to understand what's going on with the metaverse is because I've been doing AR and VR, you know, XR, these things for a lot longer than, you know, metaverse became, you know, this kind of catch word. And so there are a lot of big companies and big players that are pushing to move this whole industry along, because it is the next evolution of being able to outreach to people. That's one of the biggest things, is being able to outreach and connect to people. And so this is something that is going to happen. Those numbers are there. They're not arbitrary numbers. They're there because it is the next evolution of what's happening in the film, media, and entertainment industry. And in a bigger way, you know, on our end, you know, we talked about mental health. We talked about some of our core values. People will have the ability to connect to, for example, a therapist that they'll be able to meet on a beach, you know, in a safe place that, you know, they maybe wouldn't be able to do in the real world. People who, I have social anxiety. I'm not here as an avatar because of that, but it does help. And so with that being said, you know, people who have social anxiety, people who, you know, for whatever reason, may not have the ability to get out there and to do things in the public, they'll be able to connect. So it's that promise of connection that is the bigger part of the movement. It's not just, you know, relying on the tech. Gianfranco mentioned animators, you know, learning a little bit of coding. It's this connection that really, and that's connection to audiences, that's connection in a lot of ways, that's really driving this.
If I may just jump in to qualify that, because I really like what you're saying, Kevin, and going back to what you said about the evolution of Web 2 to Web 3, essentially is moving from a 2D interface. We would interact with 2D websites that were flat on a screen and it was text and images, right? But we're moving into this 3D-ification, I think that's the word that you used, but yeah, 3D-ification of the internet. That's the next evolution. And the joy about that for animators and for creators and storytellers is that you can surround your audience. It's no longer just that two-way relationship where you put something on a flat screen and somebody consumes it through another 2D flat screen. Actually, there's this opportunity to create something now that surrounds your audience, surrounds your consumers, surrounds your clients, surrounds your patients, if we're talking about healthcare. Actually, it's a way of bringing them into a world that isn't 2D, and that's really compelling. That surrounding people takes that connection from a 2D into a 3D space, and that makes it so much more profound.
Can I ask here about the 3D-ification is a really nice term, as we've said, but it also is about real time as well. And obviously, one of the things about animation, and maybe Gianfranco could talk to this one. One of the things about animation is traditionally you've had to render stuff out. So now animation is going real time. Could you say a bit about real time animation and maybe games engines? Do you use games engines? How do you?
Yes.
Could you say a bit about that?
Yes. So I love Unreal Engine. I love Unity too, but being able to finish an animation the moment that I actually finished animating it, and not having to like let it render overnight, let's say, and then the next day you like look at your sequences, you put them together, and something was off, and you forgot that an arm was coming off the other way, then you lost a whole day. It sometimes is a little bit more work. I don't want to like promote Unreal or anything, but with Unreal 5, it made everything a lot easier, that you don't have to prepare the scene so much as you used to have to, creating box reflections and volumes that are like contained into certain areas. It's a little bit more careless in a way, not to make a game, because then you need it to be optimized. But everything became so much easier. The asset stores, the mega scans, like sometimes I have to create a forest for a project, and instead of having to place individual trees, I can procedurally kind of create my scene in an hour or two. Everything's ready to go, and then I can start animating my camera. I can use my Oculus controllers to like have a handheld effect on the camera, not have to keyframe those things. There's a lot of things that keyframe is awesome, but when you don't have to do it for certain things, it makes your life so much better and nicer and less frustrating. But we all love animation, and it's never frustrating. But
what's interesting to me as a non-animator, and I will caveat that, but as someone who is interested in this technology, is this idea, you spoke about real time, but also this idea that actually you can potentially only need to create your assets once, and they will be created in such a way that they will be multi-use across all of these platforms. Whereas years ago, you had to recreate your characters, your world, whether you went into a game or if it was for movies, they had to be created separately. Whereas now there's an opportunity to create once, but then that can still service a game from the game engine, or it can be output for big screens and movies. And that's really interesting, again, to storytellers, the fact that actually you might only need to create once at the center, but then they're multi-use, your assets.
Yeah.
And Joe. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Gianfranco.
No, now you have so many other opportunities to actually create a performance on your own, instead of having to hand animate a character or hand animate a face or anything like that. You can actually involve yourself and your persona and it doesn't have to be acting abilities, but sometimes everything, you put a piece of yourself a little closer to it because you're capturing your body movement and your face and whatever it is into the thing. So that's really cool too.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in now because I want to make sure that we get some questions from the audience, and there are a few piling up. So bear with me. This is from Guy. He's asking Joe, and maybe we could open it up to everybody else afterwards, but Joe, is there a really great example of a brand using narrative in the metaverse space at the moment that you'd point to?
Oh, goodness. Well, I mean, what's interesting is there are lots of brands dipping their toes into the metaverse at the moment. We seem to be led a lot by high fashion. The Gucci's of this world, they're leaning into it. Sporting brands too. I think it's slightly trickier, maybe more daunting, or maybe it's something that creators are struggling to get their head around. But in terms of new IP, new franchise IP and brands, I firmly believe the next big one will come from a metaverse, from the metaverse platforms. You look at games on Roblox like Adopt Me that have got hundreds of billions of visits, and they have a whole world. They have characters, they have pets. That is a huge brand. There are movie studios that would give their IT for that number of impressions and visits and views of characters and creations. And it's no surprise that Adopt Me now are moving into licensing and merchandise. I've no doubt they've probably got studios and broadcasters knocking on their door. So I firmly believe that actually it's a fertile breeding ground for new IP, but for perhaps I'm doing them a disservice, but perhaps for more traditional creators, it's still something that they don't quite understand yet. I was looking at the NFL actually this week. The NFL launched a new experience on Roblox, their second one, quarterback simulator. Now, Roblox actually tends to pick up a younger audience. The Roblox Corporation is trying to age up their audience, but actually a whole chunk of their 50 odd million daily active users are teenagers and younger. But for the NFL that's struggling to get younger audiences and younger kids engaged with the sport, they've created quarterback sim on Roblox to pare down the sport into, you know, everybody wants to be a quarterback. They want to have a go at throwing things, but actually they're not bound by the ordinary rules of football in America. So now there's crazy target challenges on there. And, you know, the lovely thing about the metaverse is you don't have to recreate real life. No, you know, you can forget the rules of physics. You can host a show on a space station, as Kevin and Gianfranco are doing. So actually there's an opportunity for sports, for brands, for storytellers to get rid of those constraints to storytelling and really go crazy. But what was interesting is the NFL, clearly, it's not just about targeting kids on Roblox, because in this very same week, they've also launched a Fortnite NFL fan zone. Now, Fortnite has a different audience. It's a different, almost more cinematic, more rich platform on which to create an experience. So they've created almost more of a magazine area, their fan zone on there, where all of the teams can put content. They can host interviews with their star players. The San Francisco 49ers I'd seen had got a big thing on there. So actually that's a different way of telling the NFL story and bringing people in, perhaps a slightly older audience, more mature, they're into gaming, but actually they want to hear the latest stories from their particular team or the players. So in a way, actually, the NFL is beginning to embrace this different way of telling their story in the metaverse, bringing young people in. How do they engage them on the different platforms, the different demographics? That is exactly the same way that creators and animators and storytellers should be thinking about these proto-metaverse platforms and how they can tell their story across them.
Thank you. Kevin and Gianfranco, what about you? What brands telling stories are out there at the moment that you'd point to, apart from your own, of course, that you point to sort of say, you know, are kind of exemplars or sort of inspirational examples?
Well, you know, I can frame it in, so we talked about production arm of what we do for Xavatar. So, you know, we're definitely in active talks with a lot of companies towards what we call Xavatizing their projects. So that's bringing their projects into the metaverse. And so that, of course, is the road towards the release of our Xavatarverse, which is coming next year, but also for other metaverses. So there's a very popular show over there. I can't mention the show yet because we're not there with the deal, but we're in talks with bringing their project, Xavatarvizing their project into one of the metaverses. And that, again, is the promise. It's a super popular show that got picked up for the 2nd and 3rd season. And so that is the promise, which is it also gives the ability for established properties. And, you know, Joe, I love what you're saying, which is the NFL. So they're not a property, they're an institution, but established properties to extend their brand and to extend that connection to their audiences, and not only extend that connection, but you know, create indelible experiences that are immersive. And so I would say that, you know, experientially, you know, connecting with that brand, fashion has been, and I'm from the fashion world. I started in front of the camera, and you know, I studied fashion design, so I have a degree in fashion design. But fashion has been on the forefront of pushing the envelope. I mean, you know, I was just there in London about a month and a half ago. I went into Burberry. I think I bought like a keychain, but you know, Burberry just 3 weeks ago released their experience, and Roblox is an example, and it's pretty incredible. So that experience, Forbes, they just released their experience about a month ago. And that experience was really incredible, but it's really being able to connect with people in different ways. And I think brands are moving in front of that and, you know, trying to have that ability to be a part of this wave that's definitely going to happen. And, you know, I think out of the gate, the fashion world has been on the forefront of it, but you're just going to see more and more people getting involved and engaged, because it's not just about putting on a virtual headset. It's about experiencing across platforms. That could be laptop, it could be cell phone, it could be tablet, it could be in the real world. And this is now, what's going to be the evolution.
Yeah, and this is, we had hoped to have Kadine James here, who would very much speak to the fashion thing, because as you say, there's a lot of work going on between fashion and the metaverse. I'm aware of time, so I'm going to push on with a question. Then another question. Gianfranco talked about getting involved with coding, and we've also talked about games engines as ways for animators to get into this new booming area that Kevin and Joe have been talking about, but to talk about, there are other peripheral roles as well, of course. And we've got a question here about any sort of advice for writers, how writers might get involved in the metaverse. Who wants to take that one?
I think I could speak to that, but everything starts with writing, ultimately. And so Joe mentioned this concept of thinking about a story across platforms. That then, look, we had so our project, The Beach Chronicles, we did the animated film, and then when we decided to do our VR version, we were able to take a piece of that animated film, which was Daryl Hannah in a battle on this street in Miami. We're having Art Basel right now, so in Wynwood, which is a big Art Basel place, and then convert that into a VR experience that then went to festivals and these kinds of things. And so, that story I wrote as a novel first. And so we were able to take pieces of that story and apply them to different platforms in the mediums that it worked best for those platforms.
So might an idea be for a writer to sort of write the same scenario for a number of different media? Would that be something that somebody could do to show their chops in the metaverse?
I think if I might jump in, I think again it's filling in the gaps for me in terms of traditionally writers wrote for a particular medium, and you'd only got a certain amount of time to tell a story, or it was on a 2D screen, right? So as long as you get across your core narrative, there's bits that you could leave, the white space bits that you didn't necessarily need to fill in for the audience. What the metaverse and this ability to immerse in worlds and in character stories and narratives gives you is the opportunity to fill in all of those blanks. What is that character's history? What is this secondary character's story over here? Actually, there's a way that you might be able to tell that in the metaverse and across these platforms too. Now, that might mean a whole heap more work for writers in terms of having to say the things that historically they could left unsaid. But actually, I think for many, that presents an opportunity to really expand on stories and worlds and take them off into different areas. Because again, I come back to this idea related to Kevin's point about the 3D-ification of the internet. You can surround your audience with your story. That means you've got a million more opportunity to tell those stories, and there are a million more stories to tell. So I think that's the exciting thing. I suppose the nearest thing is kind of, you look at fan fiction. You've got stories that were created by writers, and they've spanned fan fiction, and there are whole platforms dedicated to fan fiction. Actually, that could all live within this idea of the metaverse. You could either write those expansive stories yourselves, or again, the joy about community and collaboration that these platforms are fostering. Maybe you could let people into your brand. Again, we've come through this period now, and I was one myself, where you had whole banks of brand managers who worked with your toy partner. You looked at style guides, you told people how they could use your brand, what logo they could use, where, not cross over into other categories. Actually, I think the way that we're moving, that's going to move by the wayside, because the idea now is that you invite your communities and your fans into your brand. You let them collaborate. You let them mash them up with other brands that aren't necessarily even yours. You don't own them. But actually, this idea that you can let them play around and involved and even co-create with your brand is the way that those huge new franchise brands of the future will be built.
Thank you, Joe. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so apologies for sort of rushing you, but I'm always, because I work at an education institution, I'm always aware of students. And this is a question about, if you were a student now, let's say you're an animation student, but you could be a student of anything really. What advice would you give them to get ready for the metaverse and to be ready for this new world of media that's going to open up to them? So animation students, let's say that, what advice would you give them now whilst they're on their animation course to head towards that metaverse? What should they study or look at particularly? Might it be a technical skill like rigging, for instance, to make avatars, or might it be environments? What would you say to those animation students to help them prepare for the metaverse? Let's say Kevin first.
This one I'd like to throw to Gianfranco first, but and then I'll follow up if there's time.
Okay, I think, my opinion might be completely off from everybody else. I think rigging is one of those things that you don't really need to do so much anymore because you have a lot of automated tools for that. And if you start, I think the most important thing is to learn how to code. If you can learn some basic stuff, I think as soon as you learn how to use terminology for what you're looking for, you can Google anything and find the answer that you need. And then no shame in copy pasting your code to help you make it, to download templates and that would be the first step. Actually, you download a template of a game that's finished, like a mini game, replace all the assets with your assets, make it your own. I think that's a great first step into getting into that kind of stuff.
Thank you. Kevin.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump on that. So certainly, there's free tools that are out there now, 3D tools. So if you're a 2D animator, and this is something that we're kind of meeting in. Yeah, look, creativity, that's the most important, I can tell you, because you look at the AR space. One of the biggest hits in the AR space, and it wasn't totally AR, is Pokemon Go. An indelible brand that people connected to because it was Pokemon. And then you had everybody walking in front of cars trying to find their Pokemon and walking off of cliffs and stuff like that, trying to find their Pokemon. But, so this creativity, I think, is the first and foremost, but also just ramping up your skill set. So there's Blender, which is for free. So, downloading Blender and starting to understand how to dive into this kind of 3D world, which is going to be important for the metaverse, although we do use 2D people. Really diving into your creativity. So doing projects that help you to expand your depth of creativity. And then this is the intersection of writing and, with the skill set of animators, getting out there and exploring the world. So there's a tool, it's called LiDAR. So you can take LiDAR, it's on, I think, the latest Apple devices, some of the Android devices, and you can download the app, and then you point it at buildings or whatever environment, and it turns it into a 3D model. And so starting to understand these different types of tools then give you the ability to understand how to tell your story across platforms. So getting out into the world, and not only understanding your environment, but understanding other people's environments. That then gives you the ability to move towards connectivity, because ultimately that's what this really is all about, connectivity.
Mm.
Thank you. Joe, what would you advise an animation student to learn?
Yeah, I would kind of echo what Gianfranco and Kevin said, and boy, how I wish I'd learned the rudimentals of coding when I was younger, because I would have loved it. And given that it's, actually it's getting easier, you've got tools that actually you can interrogate that will give you the code, which I think is really interesting. But similarly, as both the other guests have said, media has become more fragmented than ever, but we've become more connected than ever. So there's an opportunity to, I guess, just like I've said, shed the bounds of convention and think about different ways you can pull that together to tell your story, because that's lightning in a bottle, is the way that you can bring all of these elements of media together and connect them to tell your story. And that, I think, is really compelling. So, you know, almost unlearn the old way that we used to do it and think about how you can put things back together to tell your story in a new way. And that's the really exciting thing.
Joe, thank you very much. And I must say, we've only scratched the surface here, and we kind of knew that, didn't we? This is a whole new area. And I think there's also, just going on what Kevin and Gianfranco have been saying, there's, you know, that kind of interface between the virtual and the real, photogrammetry skills, LiDAR you've mentioned, but there's NERFs as well, neural radiance fields coming in. There's all kinds of techniques like that to look into to sort of bridge the gap and make that sort of. And I did like what you were saying also about the fact, you know, the metaverse is not just on a monitor. It's a whole range of connected experiences. So it only leaves me to sort of say thank you. Let's hope we can do this again sometime, and let's see where we are in maybe another year. But this has been about, hopefully animators in the audience have gained something about the metaverse and their possible future in it. And I'd like to thank Joe, Kevin and Gianfranco for their time and wisdom. Thank you very much, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.